was not aware, so I will speak.
I have
That's
one.
fine. It was just an option if people want. I think only 2 people have. Yeah. It's fine.
Has Shreya ji joined? Shreya ji,
She's
are you there?
trying to. She's just trying. I think she's there finally.
Yes, she's here. She's here.
Okay.
I think Shreya.
Where are you, Shreya ji, at the moment?
Where am I at the moment? I'm in Bombay.
Oh, in Bombay. Okay.
Okay. We can't see you yet. Yeah, there we can.
Can you see me?
Hi, Shreya ji.
Yes.
Ooh.
Good to see you again.
Your light is very bright on your face, Shreya. You're looking
Okay,
like.
I don't know what to do about it.
No, I think it's better now. Maybe it's just the glare that's coming in between. It'll be fine in some time.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, I couldn't find another light, and this one's got a red tinge, so I'm looking all red.
The red light of Shreya. As we talk about urban mobility.
Let me see if I can get another light. Just give me a moment. Just give me a moment. Yeah.
Oh, everyone is here. Thank you, Mitali ji, coming in. Thank you. Okay, ma'am, why don't you start? It's already 6 o'clock.
Yes, it started and attendees are here. They are joining.
Nice, nice. Hi,
Tell me
Mitali.
at the end where it starts, so
Good evening.
I'll start that.
Hi, Kalpana. Hi, Aishwarya. How are you guys?
Hi, Mitali. Doing good.
Is it okay to start, Kamaya?
Yes, Kirti ji.
Oh, thank you. Paladi, thank you. Thank you, everyone, friends and colleagues, Bano or Bhayo or Dosto or all everyone here. Welcome to the 95th webinar on INHAF series of webinars on rethinking city. I must tell you that we are understandably nervous approaching a century. And I continue asking the question. We made a commitment to do 150 webinars on the subject. And I continue asking questions whether we will have energy, enthusiasm, and patience to reach 150. We've been doing this almost for 2.5 years. And it doesn't cost anything, but takes huge amount of time and energy doing this. So, but we also are because when you reach such a destination, such a stage, you also ask questions that is this really relevant? Does it really leading to something? Are you learning? Is it contributing something? Those are the kind of questions we are beginning to ask now. But nevertheless, this is something which we learn a great deal from. I think I hear from everywhere that this has been a very useful initiative in terms of taking the urban issues to people and communities. And so we continue doing this. So coming to today's webinar on Women on the Move, Rethinking Urban Mobility. Let me start by thanking its anchor, Dr. Kalpana Viswanath, for putting this webinar together. I call her one early morning, I think, a few months back, and with the idea, she said it's a good idea. She was originally thinking that we should probably do one, but now I understand we're probably doing two. But thank you very much, and thank you very much also this wonderful panel that we have. Nausheen ji, my friend Rutul, I've seen him after a long time. The beard is the same. Shreya ji, Mitali ji, Sarika ji, and Aishwarya ji. So thank you very much for this panel. It's such a formidable panel. and a long, big panel. And I know we're going to kind of have a wonderful interaction today. Very knowledgeable people, people who have learned and shared so much. But before I hand over to Kalpana ji, let me share with you briefly the rationale and thinking behind this webinar series, which I said we are running for last year and a half. The series on Rethinking City. Why are we doing this? I mean, what have we been kind of, looking for? What has been achieved? What has been learned, etc., etc. And I thought what I'll do is this: that share with you a thought process which has led to this webinar series, and I tend to repeat this, webinar after webinar, because I think it's very important. There are four underlying thoughts behind this webinar series. One is that cities, despite being engines of growth and centers for culture, technology, knowledge, and global attention and investment, our cities are not in pink of health. Now, that's an important statement to make, that our cities are not in pink of health. And be that small or big city, industrial or commercial city, district town or state capital, that's across the board. And whether it's environment or water or governance or planning or slums or housing or rivers, whatever, or climate change, they all saddle with major challenges. This is the first sort of thing that triggered this whole process, that our cities are not in pink of health. Second very important consideration which triggered this process is the cities as they are and the way they're growing and developing do not look like meeting the challenge of unprecedented urbanization India is witnessing. Not only we have problems, not only we are not in pink of health, but the way they are growing, the way they are developing, they do not give confidence that we are prepared to meet the challenge adequately. It neither looks like providing safe and healthy quality of living to 870 million people in our cities in the next 30 years. By 2050, we're talking about almost doubling of urban population in the next 30 years. Talking about 870 million people. And it also doesn't look like delivering on 7 to 8% economic growth this country needs and expects in order to get rid of its poverty and emerge as an important global player. We're talking about we being Vishwaguru. And I think there is a very legitimate ambition. I'm not saying that it was very legitimate ambition. And that would require growth. And if you really want to achieve growth, you require productive cities. That's the second thing. And what we're saying is that we also do not look like having that. The third thing is this, that the governmental effort alone is not adequate to ensure healthy, livable, productive, inclusive, efficient, and sustainable cities. That government is doing a lot. You have Pradhan Mantri Awas Yojana, and you have smart cities, and you have all that that's happening. But it's also very, very clear that government alone cannot deliver what we're looking for if the health is the issue. And the last thing, which is our hope, that wider society, the human capital outside the government system has the required skills, required knowledge, experience, and even motivation to contribute meaningfully in search for alternative approaches and new solutions. And therefore, this entire series that we have put together for last 2.5 years essentially is partnership building, is bringing people together, is building up a societal partnership with government in order to deal with the issues of urbanization and housing and environment and water and all that. So it's much more. So that is where I am introducing it, saying that this effort is building a societal partnership, and each one of this webinar is a thread contributing to it. It's helping us evolve a view which we could look at eventually. And as a matter of fact, it's also happening. We already have produced a book on one of the webinars. We're already working on 2 more books. We're working on the book using 6 webinars. It's called Economic Growth in Cities. And now we are also putting together a book on microfinance and microinsurance using the experience of Annapurna. So things are beginning to happen, but of course it's nowhere near what we need. But the reason I'm telling you a little bit in detail is all of you need to be a partner in this business. It's not INHAF alone. It's not any other organization alone. It's not government alone. But it's a huge amount of work, and there is a lot to do with that. So with that introductory statement of hope, I hand it over to Kalpana ji to conduct the webinars because hardly anyone stays at the end. So let me also take this opportunity to thank my colleague, young colleague Kamaya, who's helping put this together behind the scene, and many other colleagues like Bhumaji and others who are helping this put this together. So thank you very much. This is all yours, Kalpana ji, and the panel.
Thank you so much, Kirtibai. I think I must thank you for inviting me again, because like you called me last month, one morning, 3 years ago also one morning you called me and asked us to do, you actually talked about a book and the idea of a series, and we did the first webinar on women and the city, women urbanization. So I must say you are completely inspirational that you've committed, continue to do 95 of them. I hope people like us, the rest of us, will be half as productive by the time we are able to do that as well. So I would really thank you. And INHAF, definitely the INHAF team has been very professional and helpful and got this going. I really only had to get the people on board. So thank you so much on that. As Kirti Bhai said, we are actually thinking of doing this as a 2-part webinar, because there are so many issues when we talk about the issue of women on the move, women in transport. So this the first one is focusing around the issues of availability of transport, the constraints, safety, and issues like that. And the second one is actually going to focus on women in the transport sector, women in this transport industry, because that's another very big area that's coming up today. We know that globally statistics are showing that less than 25% globally women are participating in the transport sector, and that is statistics that is looking at even ancillary sectors to transport. And if it's 25 globally, we can imagine, because there's certainly some countries it's going to be more. So many countries it's less than 10%, including in India. I think I'm not going to talk too much about the issue of mobility per se, because we have so many wonderful panelists, and I don't want to repeat what you're going to say much better. But I just want to take on the issue, the points that Kirti Bhai talked about, and I think where are we as cities in the developing world, in the global south, but those countries and those parts of the world where we are seeing and going to see the maximum urbanization in the coming decade. We know that all the growth is going to be in Asia and Africa primarily. It is not going to be in the Western world, but it's not even going to be in Latin America as much, which is already very urbanized, for the past 30 years. So we know that this is an issue that is, and as you said very rightly, our cities are not in the pink of health. I loved that term. We're certainly not in the pink of health in any of the areas. But the wide range of issues that this webinar series has addressed, I think it's important to understand that together they weave the tapestry of our cities. So we cannot look at mobility in isolation, or women in isolation, or children's needs in isolation, or climate, resilience, water, housing, unless we look at them in a holistic, related way. The changes we make will not be impactful enough. And it is imperative they're impactful, because it's not a project we're talking about. We're talking about the lives of people. We're talking about increase in temperatures. We're talking about lack of water, poor housing conditions. But we're also talking about natural disasters. We're talking about lack of infrastructure which breaks down. In so many of our cities, infrastructure is built, and by the next monsoon, it's broken. So, I think we are looking at a sort of a dire situation ahead of us. And I think partnerships are central to how we move. But within that, and as the issue that I have been working for the past 35 years of my life, women are not equal citizens of our city. Women are not equal citizens for a wide variety of reasons, from lack of infrastructure, social norms, other inequities. But really, the lack of safety, the lack of infrastructure has an impact on women's lives, which makes them unequal citizens. So when we're talking about better transport or less violence, we're not talking about just the transport or the violence. We're talking about being equal citizens in the cities that we live in. And all of us know that we are not equal. We cannot step out in the same way. We cannot do the same things. The whole work of the economy of care, which came to light during COVID, very highly in South Asia, where we recognize that the work of care is the bulwark upon which everything in our cities functions. And it is invisible, it is underpaid, and is done by women. It is done by women, and it is done by poor women. And I think we have to center stage these things when we talk about mobility, when we talk about women on the move. I like the idea, because women are on the move, not just in terms of physical mobility. We're on the move in our minds to become equal citizens across the world. So with that, I am going to stop talking and hand over to this amazing panel. I'm going to start with Shreya. And the bios are going to be put in the chat. But just to say, she's really one of the foremost urban mobility experts in India. Shreya, she leads Urban Works Institute. It's a think tank, and think and do tank. She is a founder emeritus of the India program of ITDP. She has done some fantastic things around streets, building cycle rickshaws and stuff like that. So I'm not even going to go into it, because that will take up too much time. She's been working with the government in several cities. Shreya, I'm going to just ask you to, because I know you've done a lot of interesting work, but can you help us set the context a bit and then focus a little bit on your work? I am going to ask each one of you to speak for 5-6 minutes, and there will be a second round. So it's not just a series of presentations, but a conversation that we'd like to have. Over to you, Shreya.
Sure. Thanks, Kalpana. You kind of put me in a spot, because I was expecting to come in third as per the list. Anyway, I don't have a presentation, even though we were offered to make a presentation. I thought maybe I'll just talk. One of the things, first of all, Kalpana, thanks for having me on this panel, and we've done fantastic work together. And if you remember, we had organized a conference many, many years ago, which was called Women on the Move. This is back in 2017-18, when we had worked together, Safety Pin and us. And, we also came up with a fantastic publication at that time about women in transport. So maybe, readers might be interested in that. But thank you for having me here, and thank you also INHAF for having me here. Kirti bhai, always nice to be here. I want to point out something, Kalpana, you had said at the start, where you said that women are not equal citizens. But I'd also like to say that not all women are equal in our cities. And I want to talk about, or actually, I'd like to tell a story. Let me start the story. And the story is called A Tale of Three Women. And the first of those three women is Tara. Now, Tara is an up-and-coming professional, like many of us. She's done well for ourselves, and the Smart Cities mission has been excellent for her because her company has gotten excellent projects to do across the country to do a variety of things. What they did, we don't yet know, but certainly it has been good for the consulting sector. She goes around everywhere in a car, and she's completely wed to her car because she hates traveling. Like, she has nightmares about those crowded buses that she used to travel in when she was in college. Like, she just constantly felt under the scanner as if she's going to be sexually assaulted any moment, and she just doesn't want to deal with it, right? That's Tara. Now, Tara also has a young child, and one of the interesting things that we need to see here is that Tara is the one who's responsible to take around her child, her daughter, her 6-year-old daughter, to a variety of places. Like, for example, her sports class, her music class, and whatever it is. Of course, the child goes in the car, but it's on Tara to take her child wherever she needs to go. That's the story of Tara. Now, the second character in the story is Lali, and Lali works at Tara's place. Lali is already in her mid-60s, and yet she has to work because that's the only way she can keep her family going and herself going because there isn't enough money. And she used to live in the city center in a slum, but the slum duly got relocated as part of making the city smart and putting it outside the city. Now she has to travel about 20 kilometers to reach Tara's place every day. And she's very thankful for the free buses, but free buses don't reach her because where she lives, there are only share auto rickshaws. So first she has to daily take a share auto rickshaw for nearly 15 of those 20 kilometers. And only then can she actually get on one of those free buses, right? So I think it's extremely important to also look into that angle of it. And the third character in our story is Lakshmi, who's Lali's granddaughter. And can you hear me? Sure. Lakshmi, who
Slightly louder will be better.
Okay. Let me see if I can put on my headphones. But anyway, I'll continue as I put on my headphones. The third character in our story is Lakshmi, who's Lali's granddaughter, who walks to school every day, which is about 4 kilometers away. And she would love to have a bicycle, like many of the boys in her class, but she doesn't have a bicycle. And the variety of reasons, one of which is that she just doesn't have, like, her family hasn't given her a bicycle. Two, even if she were to ride a bicycle, she's seen many of her classmates getting teased on the way as being somebody who rides a bicycle. And three, all those crazy intersections on the way to the school, she has to cross 2 highways, completely frighten her to be on a bicycle, right? So she doesn't have the ability to go to her school on a bicycle, and instead she ends up walking. So as you can see, there are 3 characters in our story, which is the reality of mobility of women in India as to a broad extent. So the big story in recent times about buses has been free buses. And I think it's a fantastic move, right? As in, free buses has liberated women so that they can go wherever they need to go. Delhi has it, now Tamil Nadu has it, Karnataka has it. And we've seen lots of good stories about it, and probably rightfully so. But money or affordability is only one of the many barriers when it comes to transport. And I'm thankful that that one barrier, it's an important barrier, has been removed, at least in some places, and maybe more places will remove. But the bigger barrier is, do you actually have the bus?
where is the bus? When we had done an assessment of Chennai, and I'm not trying to single out Chennai, Chennai is one of the best cities in terms of its bus coverage and availability. And despite having such a fantastic bus service, it has only 50% of the city's population actually has a bus stop within walking distance in Chennai, right? Despite being one of the best bus services in the country. So if the other 50% doesn't have buses, how are they even going to make use of the free buses? So the first thing that we need more buses to actually go. We need a wider network and reach those buses. Two, more and more we have seen our cities that they're making bus stops farther and farther in the hope of somehow making buses faster because they don't have to stop often enough. But what this does actually is that now everyone, but especially women, have to walk for a longer distance to reach the bus stop. And that's where actually it's more unsafe to be actually reaching the bus stop. So even if you're trying to make the buses themselves free, the walk to the bus stop is scary, right? Three, we need more bus stops as well, not just more buses, we need actually more bus stops. Third, when we don't have enough buses, women have to wait at the bus stop for longer. And that's one more opportunity for them to be harassed at the bus stop. And oftentimes they're also in a bad shape, right? So that's a different story, but even the wait itself is making it more unsafe. Four, the buses don't reach on time because they're stuck in traffic, which has not been made by them. And keep in mind that only 5% of women actually use cars in the country. And 50% women in the country use buses, and about nearly 40% use walking or cycling, give or take, broad numbers. So while women depend on buses so much more, we actually don't have that very good buses. And because they don't reach on time, it means that they tend to find jobs which are closer to home rather than getting excellent opportunities in a wider area in a city. And last but not the least, because we don't have enough buses, buses tend to be very crowded. And many of the cities, while they've created free buses, they've not expanded the number of buses, which means the buses are becoming even more crowded. And crowding is a ripe location for sexual harassment. So the long and short of it is, if we really want women to have better mobility, free buses alone doesn't cut it. We need more. We need more buses. We need more bus stops. We need better walking to bus stops. We need shorter wait times. And we need buses which are not stuck in traffic from traffic jams which are not created by those women. So this is the background with which Urban Works started a collective campaign called Bus for Us. And maybe I can talk about that later on. But the idea is that how can we come together to, one, transform the image of the bus? Because oftentimes buses don't have an image problem and nobody wants to invest in buses. So can we transform the image of the bus and get governments to invest in more buses, school buses, and fast buses, and affordable buses? Thanks.
Thank you, Shreya. I think you really laid the context very much in terms of the actual network, first mile, last mile, safety, as well as cost. I'm going to ask Nausheen, and I'm not going by this order, so all of you need to be ready. So Nausheen is, we are delighted. She is the Professor of City and Regional Planning and Director, Karachi Urban Lab, the School of Economics and Social Sciences, Institute of Business Administration, Karachi. Again, her bio will be put in the chat, but she's done a tremendous amount of research around issues of urban mobility and others, and we are really happy to have you here with us, Nausheen, and I think your Tazeen Sheikh is also here with you, a researcher. So over to you to share a little bit about what's happening just over the border. Very far in some ways, but very close in many of our experiences of the city. So over to you.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. We have a quick PowerPoint, and I wonder if that can be shared now.
Yeah, sure.
And so my lovely research assistant, who is now very much an urban planner in her own right, was part of this project, which was actually a collaboration with Safety Pin. And next slide, please. This project called Tell Me How You See It was funded approximately 3 years ago, just before COVID started. And or maybe it was a mid-COVID. And it was funded by the United Kingdom's Royal Academy of Engineering and a wonderful collaboration with Safety Pin. And it was across 3 cities, Cape Town, Karachi, and London. And in Karachi and the other cities, our focus was on female domestic workers' mobility constraints. So Tazi and I will very briefly talk about our basic findings coming out of this research. We have a report coming out very soon. It's been quite delayed, and it's largely as a result of COVID, because when we launched ourselves into the survey and the bus audits, COVID was full-fledged. Sorry, can we go back to the previous one? So in this particular project, we're trying to understand how mobility infrastructure design specifically influences the experience of female domestic workers in public spaces, with a specific emphasis on bus stops. So we conducted an audit of 23 bus stops, and our surveys were approximately 110 participants. And we see bus stops as a crucial transit points influencing urban mobility and social interactions for female domestic workers. Next slide, please. Something that really hasn't been looked at, but which this particular project really focused on, and the audits, etc., were designed by Safety Pin. So very quickly, our findings reveal a stark reality. 48% of female domestic workers spend over an hour commuting to work. 46% venture out after dark, and 76% travel entirely alone. There's tons more data that is very interesting. And the disparities in access to safe and efficient transportation, we found, disproportionately impact female domestic workers, who are among the most marginalized and vulnerable groups in urban Pakistan. And these women also invest a substantial portion of their monthly income, ranging from 10 to 50% on transportation alone, public transport. Next slide, please. So just sort of taking in these considerations. Next slide. Yes, taking in these considerations, these sort of snippets, a bit of a background on sort of the gender dynamics in Pakistan. Pakistan is ranked 167 out of 170 countries based on measures of education and employment. And on the Global Gender Gap Index 2021, Pakistan ranked 153 out of 156 nations based on 4 sub-indexes on economic participation and opportunity, education attainment, health and survival, political empowerment, etc. And public infrastructure hurdles, such as the need for safe, affordable, and accessible transport systems, largely contribute to Pakistan's low WPSI and GGGI standing. Now, I'm not a big fan of these indices, but they do tell us something, and in a very sort of aggregate sense. And the something that it's telling us is that when it comes to gender-related issues in relation to transport, especially in Pakistan, things are not good. Next slide, please. And this certainly bears out in terms of our case study. So from here, I will ask Tazi to step in, because Tazi was one of 2 senior researchers who was out there in the field for almost a year amidst the COVID situation, doing the bus audits and the surveys. And these went on, this was around about, what was it, Tazi, 2020 to 2021? Around about that time period, yeah. So almost a year, yeah. So go ahead, Tazi, please step in.
Okay, first of all, I would like to thank you, Dr. Nausheen, for giving me a chance to become a part of this insightful webinar. So I'll continue. So as Dr. Nausheen said, that we have encountered various challenges in public transport. So I would like to list down some of them. So first is that the whole public transport, transportation sector is depending on 3 different sectors. That is, first is minibuses, second is rickshaws, and third is private vehicle. So over the time period, the whole focus of transportation or urban mobility shift towards a car-centric culture. There are segregated developments that are actually hindering low-income communities' access to public spaces, or mainly urban mobility or urban transportation. So there are different challenges in public transportation. Some are maintenance-related issues, limited schedules, overloaded buses, increased fares, and crowded roads. Obviously, this whole infrastructure is lack of supportive. So including bus stops, pedestrian bridges. So this whole bus stops and pedestrian bridges infrastructure deterioration actually affect marginalized groups, and those marginalized groups by means the whole informal economy and mainly women, obvious. So mm, as you can see in this picture that many bus stops are lacking essential amenities. Those amenities include public toilets, phones, security, water, bus schedules, maps, stamps, and obviously walkable paths. So whole unsafe condition of these bus stops, particularly at night, hinder female domestic workers from using these bus stops. So there is this one exception at Do Talwar, where this whole new bus stops was developed, and that whole bus stops was larger, well lit, and used by women. But that bus stops actually lacks essential features such as schedulings or route information. But overall, these bus stops in Karachi are often neglected, and their design and amenities actually does not cater or serve the commuting public. So they are primarily used for commuting, commercial advertising, or their whole infrastructure and safety features need significant improvements. So here are some research findings that I've listed down. So first is gender and class inequalities in Pakistan. So here's some statistics that 34% gender wage gap exists in Pakistan, and this include obvious limited access to education, and all of these scenarios or all of these challenges or inequalities actually faced by female domestic workers in Karachi, and this include working in the informal economy, limited education, poor infrastructure, and financial insecurity, and as well as the current conditions. So there are rising costs, including obviously public transport fare has increased as well, and that has caused additional burden to female domestic workers. So these all inequalities impact female domestic workers, and these inequalities make them vulnerable in the urban environment. So when it comes to vulnerability, so this happened due to systematic violence, and that systematic violence exists in both, in all economic, physical, social, environmental, and cultural aspects. And as we know that there is a increasing number of female domestic workers in the informal sector, that also leads to exploitation in wages, disabilities, and domestic violence. Then there is this informal contracts and lack of legal protections that further exacerbate this vulnerability, and they have this heavy workloads with minimal breaks and unregulated hours. Then when it comes to gender mobility and fear in Karachi. So gender is obviously a limiting factor in mobility for female domestic workers. Mobility is multifaceted, that is influenced by both gender and culture. So the whole development policies that are exist in Karachi that are failed to address all these gender inequality, limited economic opportunities, and this whole cultural dominance. So women's reliance on public transport actually influence this whole contextual factors or of this travel pattern. And when we talk about this travel pattern, the journey starts from home. This whole walking to bus stops, and then this bus stop to the required destination or the achievable destinations. So there is a need for sustainable and accessible transportation in Karachi. And another factor is coerced mobility. When we say coerced mobility, so that exists due to systematic poverty, uh, that makes women or force women to travel through unsafe transportation, and that unsafe transportation by means is minibuses or whatever public transportation that is available for them, and they are in vulnerable conditions. So when it comes to fear, so there women have different kinds of fear when they are traveling or they are doing any kind of mobility. They have a fear of theft, they have a fear of being sexually violated or sexual harassment when using these kind of public transport, and they have different coping mechanism when they use that. So they kind of the do the traveling on certain timings. Then they are extra cautious about being sexually harassed and all that. Then when it comes to gender perception of safety, so this whole perception of safety obviously impact female domestic workers mobility. uh, when we talk about perception of safety, so they have this perception of danger in masculine dominated spaces and in overcrowded buses, and whole societal expectations and power dynamics actually shape these perceptions. then then we have access and age. So when we
Maybe I
talk
could
about
ask you
access,
to
it
just
means,
hurry it up a little bit so we can. Yeah.
so yeah, sure, it's last. Okay, so when it comes to access and age, so obviously women have a different infrastructure constraint that include access to basic services, and disability or age is the one factor, is the one dismissed factor that actually contributes or exacerbate this situation, because we have lack of labor laws and we have deteriorated infrastructure. So disability or age is something that women face, and this is due to lack of accessibility and infrastructure that elderly and disabled are the people that face, or are the women that face a lot of struggles. Then we have climate change. So impact of, as we know that there are rising temperatures, and Karachi has the impact of this rising temperatures, and there are different heat waves on Karachi. So there's a need for improved ventilation and shaded areas in transportation. Then last is the COVID-19 lockdown. So economic impact of the COVID-19 pandemic on female domestic workers was worst. They faced different challenges due to limited transportation options during lockdowns, and there are various stories that they have to travel, or they have to walk for even hour or 2 hours just to reach the employer, because they were not agreed to let them skip their work, and there are different scenarios like that. So Dr. Nausheen?
Yeah, I'm not going to. We can perhaps revisit this later because we've taken up quite a bit of time. But hopefully, this gives everyone sort of a general idea of what we're looking at when we talk about women on the move in the Karachi context and generally in the urban Pakistan context. Thank you. Thanks, Tazi. Thank you, Kalpana.
Thank you, Nausheen and Tazeen. And it's like, I mean, all of us working in the sector, and the issue of domestic workers is a very much extremely similar in India. So I'm not going to belabor that point. We all completely understand what you're saying. I am going to move on to Mitali, because I think Mitali, who is a consultant with the Transport Global Practice at the World Bank, she's an economist, she's written, and I want you to speak, Mitali, really now, bring together some of these with the toolkit that you have been worked on, which is really looking at enabling gender responsive urban mobility in public spaces. And sort of, I think a lot of issues have come up in these two presentations, and they will continue to come up. But I think it'll be useful to see some of your research findings to see how we can put this together. So over to you, Mitali.
Thank you. The organizers, to Kalpana for thinking of having us and having me on this panel. And of course, I think I'm one of the youngest and newest entrants to this entire group. So I'm really learning from all of you. And of course, the toolkit was a culmination of all of the research which has taken place. I mean, be it Shreya's contributions, be it contributions from Sonal, and the other sort of stalwarts in the field, Vandana, everybody I think contributed to the toolkit. So I just want to quickly share I'll share the link to the toolkit. And I think Kalpana, why I was requesting is obviously because I'm actually on mission in Nepal right now. So and I think that actually links to Shreya's story, because I have to walk. Over here, my hotel is about 10 minutes from the office. And the expectation that the bank has is that, bank staff are just going to walk to the hotel. And in other countries, when we go, we typically have some cars or something like that. But here, it's like the hotel is closed, so you can walk. But it's the evening time. So we have been told that you have to walk and go to the hotel before 8 p.m. or before 7:30 or before. So even though Kathmandu is very safe, you know, still we have these directives. So that's why I actually requested to speak. And this is the personal experience that we all have, that when we are in different cities, and I think this is how I wrote the toolkit. When I was living in different cities over the course of these years in my career, I had a different curfew time for every city. So in Johannesburg, my curfew time was 5 p.m. And in Delhi, my curfew time used to be like, no, I'm going to get back home by 9 p.m. And I think for many other women who are not from Delhi, in Delhi, their time is, the mental time that you have, that I have to come back home, is probably earlier. And in New York, I used to be like, no, I have to come back home by midnight. And now probably that's again changed. And in London, I used to say, okay, I can stay out till 3 a.m. It's fine. Because, that was one place where I think I felt the safest out of all the different cities I've lived in. And I think from that perspective, and taking that as a departure point, we worked on this toolkit. And the idea of the toolkit, I think, came up from our lead transport specialist Gerald Olivier, who's obviously an urban transport specialist, and he works a lot on transport oriented development and transit oriented development. And he felt that when we look at urban planning and urban mobility planning, particularly as an exercise, we don't see women's voices. And I think that's going to be the subject of the second webinar. But the second thing that we don't see is we have all of these policies, whether it's coming up with a comprehensive mobility plan, whether it's coming up with, a entire, sort of urban mobility transport authority, which is what we are trying to promote in different cities through a programmatic approach. That yes, let's have a, comprehensive or centralized urban mobility transport authority. But in none of these sort of institutional and policy structures, you don't see a gender lens being applied in a systematic fashion. And that was our attempt with the toolkit, that here is a framework for any city level authority that wants to embark on this journey of having gender responsive, interventions in their city. Now, that's how we wrote it, and we came up with a 4-pillar framework where we really advocate for assessing the ground situation to start with, understanding those gender responsive urban mobility patterns, but then of course doing a safety audit, which of course, from safety pins methodology, we've basically recommended the same methodology, but also built it up a little bit with participatory safety audits is something that we are also really advocating after a lot of experiences with safety pins team. And then looking at strengthening institutions, strengthening policies is our second pillar. The third pillar is around building capacity, raising awareness, making sure that there's a approach to having more and more bystander intervention, having more and more trainings for frontline workers, because they are often the first respondents in the situation of sexual harassment on public transport and in public spaces. And then lastly, but not the least, is really starting to develop infrastructure and services to cater to the needs of women and persons of minority gender, but also having that universal accessibility lens. And I think it's always difficult for us, isn't it, when we talk about women, because the immediate thing that we are told is, yeah, but also make it accessible for persons with disabilities. And it's just not the same, because in a recent project that we are doing with the National Capital Region Transport Corporation, we were requested to do exactly this. They said, yeah, you make it inclusive for everyone. And we had a round table with persons with disabilities, and we had actually people with different types of disability join us. And we realized that for even a person with different types of disabilities, we have to have so much, we have to design things in such a different way. Somebody who is deaf requires a completely different level of service on a public transport, like a bus or a metro, vis-a-vis somebody who is blind, because a deaf person needs a different set of tools versus a blind person. So how can you then club that with women, right? It's just, you just cannot do that. So I think when it comes to inclusion in a programmatic fashion, we've come up with these 4 pillars. Now, what has our experience been when we are working with different cities in South Asia? Because, of course, the toolkit was written for India, but we have found through a lot of trial and error that it is very applicable to various South Asian cities, particularly Dhaka, Kathmandu. And I would encourage Nausheen. I mean, I've been working on Pakistan as well. So in case there's an interest, we're happy to work together, because we do have a large team in Pakistan which is dedicated towards gender responsive mobility, and I've been supporting them as well. So on this, we really find, and in Kathmandu currently also I've been advocating for to look at this entire 4 pillar framework. And the uptake has been, of course, the strongest in Chennai, you know, where we have a large urban mobility program called the Chennai City Partnership, which is being followed by another second program called the Urban Mobility and Spatial Development Program. And because they have set up this institutional mechanism called the Chennai Gender Lab, which really, I think Gerald has been the father of the Gender Lab in that sense, in terms of pushing it and making sure it passes. And now I think Sarah and I are like the mothers, where we are just pushing, making sure that it's surviving. And it's a uphill journey, on an everyday basis. We have to make sure that money is being allocated to the Gender Lab, financing is there, there's a clarity in terms of what they are expected to deliver. It's a daily, we do weekly check-ins with them, just to make sure that everything is in a manner where where they are meeting their objectives, and we are trying our best to support them with Mira's leadership, and she's such a strong leader. But still, it's a process. So we have discovered through this process of working with Chennai that having an institutional mechanism and having a dedicated body within a municipal corporation, a public transport authority, really signals the true intent of the city authority to take action. Because unless they do that, it becomes difficult for anyone else. Everybody starts asking you, whose job is it? And it's only when you have that kind of institutional responsibility that it becomes clear it's this person's job. And I think, just to conclude, there are other cities also where we are seeing traction. Delhi is, of course, one of them, Bangalore as well. And we remain open to partnering with, all the people who are present on this call, whether it's OMI, whether it's Safety Pin, or anyone else. And of course, Shreya, yourself, all of us are anyway on connected, and we have been working together for a while, but we remain open to partnering and doing more work in cities where you think that there's an appetite and where the bank presence can help. So I think with that, I'll stop, and happy to take questions in the next half, and I'll share the link now. Thank you.
Thank you, Mitali. I think you brought up an interesting point, about when we talk about women, and I think Shreya's put it in the chat. She's saying they assume that being a woman is a disability almost, And while I'm not at all saying that the issue of disability or children or older people is not an issue on the street, but I think it's also a sense that if we are nearly 50% of the population, women and girls, it should be enough to say that, how do we design spaces to include women and girls' needs, completely taking on what Shreya said, that all women and girls don't experience the city in the same way. I am going to move now to a slightly different perspective. I'm going to ask Sarika, who works on road safety. She is the director at Nagaro and the founder trustee of the Rahagiri Foundation, which has looked at building something called the Car-Free Days started in Gurgaon, Haryana, and then in Delhi and other cities. She's also the bicycle mayor of Gurgaon. And she is very brave to bicycle around the city. I mean, Shreya, when you're talking about one of your characters scared to bicycle, I think many of us are actually scared to bicycle in our cities. So, Sarika, I mean, as an activist, as an urban planner, designer, as a champion for cars, but also a gender champion in your own right. Can you shed light on some of the issues that come when you start looking at the street as streets for all? Over to you.
Thank you so much for having me here. I just want to quote both what Shreya said. that all the women are not traveling or equal in our cities the way they travel. And it's not about women, it's about girls. You know, 100% girls from our government schools either cycle or walk. Not even I'm saying 99%. 100%. So it is such an important thing, and this girls or even anyone in this, like, people who are using street, how they are unsafe, boys, girls, everyone, because 80% fatalities that happen, people who get killed in our road or get seriously injured, are in the age group between 15 to 45, which are youth of our country. And globally it is the same thing. So that's where road safety or street design plays a very important role. When even talking about mobility, even public transport system, the last mile collectivity is either walking or cycling. Mostly it is walking. Cycling means you are going from A to B by cycle, but if you are using public transport, that means you are walking. You have to walk to your bus stop, to your metro station, and that's how all the public transport users are also pedestrians. And the street is, I think, the most neglected, abused part of infrastructure development in our country. That's the last thing that we consider. We always talk about roads. We need to develop more roads, developing more roads, 50 kilometer of roads every day that north is developing, but very streets. In fact, we are developing our urban street also, like in highways, roads. So coming from that road to street is a big way. Like, it's just starting. And just giving an example, we are developing one of the street in Gurgaon, where Kalpana's office is also there, our office is also there. And in that street, 80% people either walk or cycle. Again, almost all are marginalized workers, migrant workers, who are working as a laborer, or factory workers or domestic helps. And in the entire stretch, there was not a single meter of footpath. And this pedestrian were walking on the man carriageway. And of course, if slow moving vehicle and fast moving vehicle is using the same street, there will be traffic conflicts. And what government thought of is, like, there is a traffic problem, let's cut up all 400 fully grown trees and let's widen the road so that there will be no traffic jams, not considering any kind of user survey, traffic volumes, nothing. And when we jumped into it, that hey, in this road almost 80% people are walking and cycling, that is almost 30,000 people every day using this street by walking or cycling, then there is a need to sift these people and giving a dedicated space. And now this one of side of this road street has footpaths and cycle tracks, and we can see drastic change, especially on women who are, because a lot of women we see use this street in the night also. Many of them have night shifts in these factories. And the perception of safety is so important for a woman to go for going to school, going to colleges. That's why street plays very important role when it comes to women. As Shreya says that 80% of the women who are working or who are commuting from any purpose are either walking, cycling, or using public transport. So shifting from road to street is what we need in our cities, in our country. Second, there is a second dynamic to road safety. As I said that for 80% people are getting killed or getting permanently disabled, injuries, which is almost 1 million people every year in our country. Almost 2.5 lakh people getting killed, or almost 6 to 7 lakh people getting seriously injured, which leads to permanent disability. And if I'm saying that 80% of them are in the age between 15 to 45, and also almost 70% of them are male. So the only breadwinner of the family getting killed, and the burden to a woman in the family is so huge that leads to poverty of that family. Actually, the kids and women actually they're losing the only source of income. And this woman, if they don't have a vehicle, if they are not accessible to public transport, if they cannot walk safely, then they don't have any employability, they no income source. And a person is disabled and in the house, then they need to take care of that person also, healthcare also. So it's not just about your commuting or your accessibility to your employability or your education, but it's about the economic burden, the social burden to the woman. If we are not actually addressing and improving the public transport system in our cities or walking and cycling in our cities, it's a lot of other impacts actually. So that's how to address this. First we started with Rahagiri Day, as Kalpana said, to demonstrate why a street should look like, how people really willing to walk or cycle. And we engage with a lot of youth in this, and that's leading to small changes through this street transformation. So this is the dynamic actually, when we look into uh, you know, walking, cycling, and public transport, and developing such infrastructure, like the infrastructure for uh, people who are actually not having cars.
Thank you, Sarika. Thank you so much. I think the whole issue of moving from roads to streets is a very important one, and the issue of the burden of care, which continues to be on women's shoulders. So thank you for bringing out these issues. And I think it's a very different perspective. Yesterday on LinkedIn or Twitter, Rutul said, I'm delighted to be the only man on this panel of women. It's nice to see that change. So I'm not going to put you last. I am going to give you a chance to speak now. Aishwarya, you'll understand. There's no first and last because we'll be going again after this. So Rutul is an architect, urban planner with a PhD in transportation studies, and is a senior associate professor at CEPT University with 20 years of academic research and experience. I mean, CEPT University has really produced many architects, urban planners, urban designers who are doing work in the social sector. So I think that's the other thing, to move into, say Safety Pin, for example, is full of people from CEPT up and architects and urban planners, so much so that I, a sociologist, have termed myself an honorary urban planner just by sheer this thing of being with them all the time. And of course, friends like Sarika and Shreya. So over to you, Rutul, to sort of share some of your work and some of your insights into this. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Kalpana, for including me to be part of this panel. And it's really a privilege. I admire a lot of your work that many of the panelists do here. And I mean, let me start with a story of about 10, 12 years back. When I was younger, and when one of my students approached me to study the state of cycling in Indian cities, and specifically how low-income group women in Ahmedabad does not cycle much. And that was a research question that she was asking. And compared to other cities where there is a large section of industrial working class, you will see that many more women will be cycling. So what changed? So I think she did very good work. And what it so happened that in her final review of her PG thesis, there were 3 men, civil engineers, middle-aged, and she has done a completely qualitative work. And they kept asking her certain questions like, what is the sample size? Why do women need to cycle? As if why do they need to exist in the city was sort of part of that, some of those embedded questions. So I think in transport, what we are often fighting is multiple of these factors where, there is a dominance of certain kind of discourses, there is a dominance of certain kind of methodologies, there is a dominance of certain kind of ideas. And a lot of those ideas are pretty much embedded in the way in which we have planned our cities post-independence. So there is embedded automobility in the way in which we imagine our cities ever since we started planning them after independence. And starting from Chandigarh, and I think we should be sort of very candid about it now, to say that, while we are trying to solve some problems in our city, And the idea of self-containing neighborhood, inward-looking neighborhood, when we created and turned that into a Chandigarh sector or a Gandhinagar sector, what we forgot is that what that sector or that inward-looking neighborhood does to the city. What it does is that it creates a sort of an opaque periphery around it, and whatever is the leftover is what we are left with the city. And then on those roads where you don't have those self-containing neighborhood, you are supposed to design a city for the mobility of the cars. And I think a lot of the unsafe environment in our cities happen because the way in which we have designed the combination of those two things, as Sarika was saying, that roads for vehicle and self-containing neighborhood which are inward looking, and that's why you have no eyes on the street. Whereas if you look at the section of old city of Jaipur or anywhere else, you will find that we have always sort of celebrated mixed land use and niche dukan upar makan overlooking kind of a spaces always, which brought a very different kind of vibrancy to our cities. But I think that embedded automobility is not only in terms of plans, but it's also there in terms of ideas. And it is also there in terms of the kind of knowledge that we produce with this. And I think that's something that we also have to challenge. And I'm right now only talking from the perspective of research institute and academic institute, that how do we have to challenge that perspective where, you get three random middle-aged civil engineers together and, that becomes a sort of, and also the idea is the surety by which they were arguing. And obviously my student was not very sure, although she has done all the work, and I think it's also it's pretty much embedded in the way in which things happen in our country and our city. And I think that also needs to be challenged. And that is where what we need to do is more of the other conversation of transport or the other conversation of transport. And I think that is where I think that gender and mobility is a very, very important lens. And to be very frank and candid, again, a lot of us got educated into this when we read book like Why Loiter, or, a lot of the work that many of you have done in last 10, 15 years. And I think that is where we realize that, something that comes as an embedded knowledge to women of how to survive in our city, we had to be made realize by reading books. And I think that's also we have to probably somewhere document that how do women survive in the public transport system. I mean, how do they get harassed? We know that part of the story. The little that we know is what do they do intuitively, something which is embedded as a knowledge passes on from people to people, so that how do they keep themselves safe? And I think there's a lot to learn and document there, because those are all survival stories, right? How do you survive on a bus station, on a bus, on a system, and how do you continue to work year after year? And I think that's where probably I want to end by saying that transport is sort of, literally the means of moving in the city. But what are the ends? And I think that's a question that we also have to ask. Are our ends, right to the city, right to survive in the city, right to prosper in the city? Are our ends sort of certain level of social justice, our civil liberties, all of that? And how to be sort of economically, how to sort of increase our economic well-being. And the question then we have to ask is that while we become prosperous as a society, as we have becoming, are we going to sort of still have this kind of systems that we have? Would women still be harassed when we become a prosperous society? So I think there is also an interface of prosperity and modernity there. But apart from that, the embedded automobility that I spoke about, that when we buy cars, do we buy them as sort of symbol of modernity, or do we buy them as a symbol of power? And I think that is where there is a lot more discussion and thinking needs to be done as to, how do we challenge this embedded automobility? Just by the numbers, if you see in India between 1951 to 2005, we have added 10 crore vehicles. Between 2005 to 2015, we added another 10 crore. And between 2015 or 16 to 2022, in just those 6-7 years, we added another 10 crore vehicles. Okay, and you match those numbers with the, the road that Sarika was talking about, or the sort of air pollution and other indicators, and you will understand what is really going on, especially after the pandemic. And I think somewhere we have to change that trend of automobility and also the embedded automobility as an idea which is there in the planning of our cities. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Rutul. This yours and Sarika's point reminds me very early, many years ago when I was working in Jagori and we started doing safety audits. We did a focus group discussion with the National Association of the Blind. And we asked them, what is it that you want? And they said, don't build flyovers because we cannot cross the road. Something as simple as that. It shocked us when we heard this, And another story is that when you're talking about the auto-mobility, I like that word actually, and modernity. I mean, Nausheen will also agree that our post-colonial cities, the imagination with which we built them, was a notion of modernity that we moved along with, with this thing. And the Jyoti Singh case of 2013, in 2014, some of us women's groups in Delhi, we did a kind of a safety audit and went on that route that Jyoti Singh went. And one of the things we found was that that bus did not need to stop for a red light. So actually, if you slow down the road, if it had to stop, maybe somebody would have seen this violent act being committed inside the bus. It was just that because so the impact of this automobility is very wide on our society. It's not only on the car, but it's on the disabled person, it's on women, it's on the work of care, it's on children for sure. I think so. I think it's really important to unpack all that. Shreya says automobility makes it sound desirable. Okay. Well, I don't think so, Shreya. We can define words. We can choose how we want to make it sound. We'll make it sound really terrible. Automobility, and then it is not a positive thing. So over to you, Aishwarya. Aishwarya is an urban designer and architect, as I think many people on this panel are, with 7 years of practical experience. So she's also a young woman. We're very happy that you were able to join us. She serves as a lead at the Center for Inclusive Mobility at the Ola Mobility Foundation. So I'm going to ask you to share some of your work. And we know that the Ola Mobility Institute has been doing some stellar work around the ease of moving in India. So over to you, Aishwarya, for your short. I think you have a presentation.
Thank you, Dr. Kalpana and Mr. Shah for having me here. While I just load my PPT, I'm really honored to be part of this panel, and I completely resonate with Mitali about sharing the space with the known experts in the field. And also for me, when I was in Delhi, staying in 2015, in my head, my curfew time was 8 o'clock. So I get what Mitali was saying. Also, I would like to thank Shreya for setting the context through a story, a tale of 3 women, because that's what also I am going to talk about, storytelling combined with data, making data comics, which OMI Foundation recently released Bindu's Big City Journey. But before that, a very brief introduction to OMI Foundation, who are new, who don't know us. We are a policy, research, and social innovation think tank working at the intersection of mobility innovation, governance, and public good. We have 3 centers of excellence. First is Center for Inclusive Mobility, where I am the lead, Center for Future Mobility, and Center for Clean Mobility. So just a few months back, OMI Foundation launched a campaign, Moving While Women, around the intersection of gender and urban mobility. So what does moving while women mean in Indian city? And does a woman's experience of navigating urban India's mobility differ from that of men? And if yes, then how? And are these differences more pronounced for women from economically disadvantaged group, women with disabilities, transgender or non-binary individuals, adolescent girls, and elderly women? So this campaign seeks to answer all these questions and much more through a data-driven lens, comprehensive research, and the real-world experiences. So under this campaign, we launched first ever data comics, Bindu's Big City Journey, that highlights these diverse realities faced by different women groups, their needs, their aspirations while moving in our cities. We aim that the comics provides a platform for awareness as well as for advocacy, fostering a deeper understanding of these issues. And not just that, we also hope that captivating nature of data comics serves as a catalyst for discussions, collaborations, and initiatives amongst the policymakers, policy influencers, city authorities, civil societies to take actions on ground. So having said that, as you see, Bindu, she's the main protagonist over here. She is on a journey to find the most convenient mode of transport from her home to workplace. She has just moved from a small city to a big city. This particular data comics covers a range of aspects from safety to accessibility to reliability and affordability. For example, Bindu, who takes a shorter route in the morning from her home to reach a metro station. But while returning in the evening, she prefers to chooses a longer route because she realizes that the shorter route is now dark, isolated, drunk men are there. She doesn't feel really safe while walking on that road. So she then checks her map and then chooses the longer route to reach to her place. Also, there's another instance where she realizes that taking auto rickshaw every day is not really affordable for her, as she's a person who has joined newly to a job. So she chooses to take metro. But at the same time, her neighbor Shanti, who is a homemaker, a young mother, finds it difficult to afford metro. So last year, in our Ease of Moving Index survey, we surveyed more than 20,000 women across 40 cities of India to understand their perspective on urban mobility. And this data comics provides early insights from the survey. And one of them is that over 40% of surveyed women find metro unaffordable. Another key insight that came out was that over 42% of surveyed women find public transport unsafe. The findings on transgender and non-binary individuals were alarming for us. They are likely to be harassed 4 to 5 times more in public transport as compared to cisgendered. So of course, these are the early insights from the survey. Later this year, we are coming out with the comprehensive report on gender disaggregated analysis on the Ease of Moving survey. After the data comics released, we have seen interest from various cities to understand more about the issues faced by the women while traveling. We have also noticed that they're more open, willing to learn, and to deepen their understanding and engagement with the data, potentially leading to more data-backed policy decisions. So I invite all of you in the audience to come explore data comics on our website, share data comics with our networks, help us spread the message and awareness. And if you have your own stories, I think all of us have our own stories of one of the experiences, what some good or bad, mostly bad experiences to share. So if you have your own stories, insights that you want to share with us, use the hashtag #MovingWellWomen, tag us on your post, join us in this movement for the change that leads to build safer, affordable, inclusive, and more accessible Indian cities. Thank you all. Here are my coordinates in case you would like to get in touch with me or follow the Institute's work. I think I hope I am on time, under 5 minutes.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Kaishal. Yeah. I love the idea of the comics. I think creative messaging always, and in today's day of, such short attention spans, I think we all recognize the visual medium, music, other, ways of reaching people, especially young people, is super important. I think one theme that ran across a lot of that what you spoke was really the stories. I think Rutul, when you talked about it, I mean, I know women who in SPA who tried to do this work, pioneering work, for 20 years ago. It was the thing, but it is, and you're right, all of us have our stories. I think there's, I whenever we do workshops, when with groups of women, I have yet to meet one woman who says I have zero experience of sexual harassment in my life anywhere in the world. Like, to say that completely, I've never experienced, I have no idea what it is. So I think it is a very gendered, though nuanced by class, by caste, by geographical location, definitely. So now I actually have questions, but I think it's also, I'm happy to open it up if there are some participants who'd like to ask some questions or give some comments at this point before we go back to the second round. So Kimaya, are there questions? Are you moderating that? I think
the Q&A is open for people to ask.
Yeah. I'm not seeing anything in the Q&A, but maybe, a couple of questions or these things. It's nice because people have been patiently listening to all this. I think it's always nice to also this thing. So I'm actually, and I'm sure all the speakers would be happy if there are some specific questions, general questions, comments from the audience. Can they ask? Can they speak? Or is it not that kind of a Zoom webinar?
I'll just open the chat box to make it easier.
Yeah, please go ahead. But maybe while we're waiting for a couple of people, I think maybe both Shreya and Nausheen, I think you both were beginning to talk about some specific examples. So Shreya, maybe the stuff you're doing now in Ahmedabad and the other city, and then Nausheen about the concrete actions on the ground. We can just begin with that, just a few minutes, a couple of minutes if both of you can speak. Shreya first.
Maybe this time Nausheen can have the spot test.
Sure. Go ahead.
Okay. So no, I'll sort of carrying on in terms of the points that Tazi and I were trying to make in the slides, and there is actually so much to cover. And that particular report that we are putting together, which is long overdue, as Kalpana very well knows, will hopefully be out later this year, or perhaps early next year. One of the interesting things is that in women's, specifically female domestic workers' perceptions of safety, issues of sexual harassment overlap with so many other dynamics. It's not as if one can say that the story is only about sexual harassment in public spaces or while standing at the bus stop or while riding the bus. So issues of overcrowding and the way that a bus is driven and the location of a bus stop and the state of the bus stop and the state of public spaces, all of these things sort of overlap in very complex ways with with perceptions of safety and violence. So these categorizations of what women think is violent or perceptions of safety cannot necessarily be disaggregated from the broader issues of the built environment, how public transport systems are designed, how bus stops are designed or not designed, and so certainly in the context of Pakistan's urban centers, they are fairly non-existent. Another point that I would like to draw attention to is that in the Karachi context, and certainly in other cities in Pakistan, there's been a considerable amount of emphasis put on the upgradation of transport networks over the last 2.5, 3 years. So there are new kinds of projects that are in the pipeline, some of which have already been implemented, new transport routes, new bus transit systems, green lines, red lines, and so forth, which of course have kind of uprooted the infrastructure of the entire city. And we see this constant state of a city that is in a state of disrepair and repair and reconstruction. And in this context, a very minute amount of the city's marginalized or underserved residents are actually being served by these new spectacular projects. So the impression created by these projects is, I mean, these projects are important. These new bus lines and these new transit routes are important, aside from the environmental impacts that they have, which are quite controversial. But they actually serve a very, very small percentage of the overall population. I think that my colleague, Dr. Nauman Ahmed, over at NED University did a calculation, and I think, if I'm not mistaken, the figure was around 10 to 15% of the overall working class population of the city, maybe even less. And whilst these projects, which are often funded by the World Bank, try the utmost to sell themselves as green initiatives with a focus on gender inclusivity and so forth, one of the underlying issues is that how far can these projects actually sustain themselves, because they're actually implemented on the basis of loans. So the question of sustainability of these kinds of projects and new transport projects to serve the public, this is also a very controversial aspect of it, how they are financed, the fact that they are usually, in the Karachi context, certainly financed on the basis of loans. So when it comes to payback periods, interest rates and those sorts of things, how far will it impact the sustainability aspects of these kinds of projects? And then the third point that I would like to make about this is, and this is anecdotal evidence so far. So one of my colleagues, the associate director over at Karachi Urban Lab, Mr. Mohammed Tawheed, has been taking these new buses, just testing them out, and both on the gender angle and generally to see what the situation of overcrowding is like. And he put up some very interesting photographs and shared some of his observations on his Twitter account recently, about just a couple of weeks ago. And the issue of overcrowding also extends to these new buses as well, that are air conditioned, that are very green, that are supposed to be more sustainable. And so, so we are looking at a situation where we are observing that for women, especially for working class women, it appears that even in the context of new projects that are supposed to be sustainable, better equipped, air-conditioned buses, women are looking at, female domestic workers are potentially looking at more expensive fares, because these buses are more expensive, and the issue of overcrowding returning, even in the context of these new kinds of transport systems, because there aren't necessarily enough buses to cover the entire population's needs, the working class population's needs. So these kinds of issues also then need to be addressed, need to be thought about, that these projects don't necessarily resolve the problems, because there are so many other intersecting issues that need to be addressed simultaneously that aren't necessarily talked about. So these are the sorts of things that are showcased in the report that we're going to be taking out soon also. So there's no straightforward panacea, unfortunately. Yeah.
Thanks, Nausheen. Shreya, before you answer, there's a couple of questions. So one person has asked about the issue of bus stops moving further apart, non-functional bus stops, and whether there's some corporate lobbying affecting this. So when you answer, maybe you can also look into this issue. Over to you, Shreya.
Sure. So I think a big part of the reason why bus stops are moving apart, at least from the way I understand it, is the wish to reduce obstructions, quote unquote obstructions, for the movement of vehicles. So because when you have more frequent bus stop there, and if the buses stop there, it's seen as being an obstruction to the rest of the traffic to move. Now, they can be designed better, but the principal point is buses are being made less accessible. Even if buses are there, buses are being made less accessible to make it easier for automobiles to move more smoothly. So, see how sort of, how circuitous sometimes the push of the idea of automobile is, that not only do you not want to give money for buses or make buses reach everywhere, you also want to make those buses be less desirable, to make the automobiles more desirable. That's one of the reasons why bus stops have been removed in between. So, earlier bus stops used to be somewhere between 300 to 400 meters apart. Now bus stops are typically in most cities about 800 meters, sometimes even more apart. And the minute they're farther off, it means that you have to walk longer, or you choose not to use transport at all. And if, or, not to use buses, or sometimes you stop even traveling because it's almost impossible for you to travel, right? And therefore, we are pushing through the Bus for Us campaign for the idea of the 555 agenda, if you will, or the 555 framework, which is have a bus stop which is no more than a 5-minute walk, which means 300 meters. If you want a bus stop within 300 meters, you need 16 bus stops for every square kilometer. I think that's a nice thumb rule to have of how many bus stops to have. Nobody's ever given a thought about it. 2, if you want the entire city to be covered, with easy bus stops and network, you need at least 4 kilometers of bus network for every square kilometer of the city, the built city. So if a city is 100 square kilometers, you need 400 kilometers of bus network, and you need 1,600 bus stops. It's as simple as that, if you will. And we oftentimes try to complicate ideas, but sometimes the math can be fairly simple of how you can start building these services. The first 5 was a bus stop within 5-minute walk. The second is a bus within 5 minutes after you reach the bus stop, no more than 5-minute wait. And if you want no more than 5-minute wait, we again calculated it in multiple ways, and we came back to the same thumb rule of somewhere between 40 to 60 buses per lakh inhabitants, per 100,000 inhabitants. So if the city of 100 square kilometers essentially has a population of 2 million people, 20 lakh people, you need 20 lakh into 60, 1,200 buses. And how much does 1,200 buses really cost? It actually costs very little. 1,200 buses cost 1,200 crore rupees, Indian rupees, give or take. And if you actually manage to get the cost of the bus out, the rest of it gets paid by the fare. It's enough to get paid by the fare, a fare which is less than what it costs to use a two-wheeler in the Indian context. So, but instead, what are cities doing? They're using this 1,200 crores to build, do you know how many kilometers of metro? Exactly 2 kilometers of metro. 1,200 crores, which would have been serving a city of 20 lakh people, 2 million people. They would go ahead and have a Disney ride of 2 kilometers and not have these 1,200 buses. And I think that's where the crux of the problem is there. And the larger cities, you have business leaders who are promoting the idea of steel flyovers and tunnel roads for a cost of 50,000 crores. For a cost of 50,000 crores, we actually calculated we could have an entire bus mission for that state, to have every city to have those buses, which we talked about. Every city in that state have buses to reach every corner of the city, with bus stops at every corner, with all these buses being air-conditioned buses, without there being crowding, having fantastic depots, having fantastic footpaths to reach these bus stops, and having great bus stops which are protected. So does one city deserve to have a few tunnel roads, or does an entire state deserve to have buses everywhere?
Thanks, Shreya. You're always very passionate about this. And I think the point that you made is the same thing that Nausheen said, what are these kind of pet projects, and, how they want to be seen. There was one question that has come about a lack of a national level framework. I don't know, Rutul, maybe would you like to speak to that? About the national level framework. There was another question on participation of women in the transport sector. As I said, we will be having one more webinar later this year, which will focus completely on the issue of the transport sector and how do we make it more diverse. So I hope that you will join for that webinar itself. But Rutul, maybe you can talk a little bit about the framework, policy, national level, state level, these different policies that Kirtibai talked about in the beginning. How are they really working to address some of these concerns?
Right. So I think very quickly, national framework is possible, but the question really is that would it be backed by any mandate or a budget, right? Otherwise, I think we can make frameworks and guidelines and a lot of those things. But unless it is backed by either a statutory mandate or some sort of a budget, I don't think that it will go anywhere. The reason why National Urban Transport Policy, we talked about streets for people or roads for vehicle. I think that worked because it was important to take that in account in designing all the JNNURM projects, and because I mean that's the reason why it was. I mean, some bits of it were implemented successfully in some cities. So I think unless we sort of think of this in terms of where is the money coming from and who has the mandate to do this, those are the two very important questions to ask. And let me also break it down to city level. It's extremely difficult to read municipal finance and how much they spend on transport, and out of which how much do they spend really on the sustainable transport. And in that, look at the participation of women. If more women are using public transport, walking, cycling, then how much of the city is spending on those modes of transport? And I think somewhere we'll also have, we probably require some sort of a guideline to write the municipal budgets differently, so that we can at least know how much money is being spent on many of these modes in the cities.
Yeah, thank you. I am going to hand over to Sarika and then Aishwarya and Shreya, but there are 2 points in the questions that I think I just want to highlight here. Maite who is here from, and she talks about the similar study of students' mobility in the University of Mexico. I think it's very interesting to say that there's similar findings. She said that young women were saying that they felt safe using the bicycle instead of using the metro, which is interesting. Now, Mexico also has a very extensive metro system. And before all of you answer, there's a question about what is the root of violence against women in public transport? So you can answer these, but as well as continue the conversation that's going. Sarika, over to you.
So I just want to add what Ratul said. Of course, the Ministry of Housing and Urban Affairs has some kind of national level policies, guidelines, and now the PM bus Seva has also launched that 1,000 buses will be, and then later 10,000 buses will be given to states. But fortunately or unfortunately, of course, with the budget, like the even FAME scheme came, this small scheme came, but problem is with the scalability of these schemes. As Shreya said, we need in Gurgaon we need 1,200 buses. So far we have only 120 buses. So, and it's been last 3-4 years we could not able to add more buses to Gurgaon's fleet. Why? We added almost some 100 kilometer of roads in the city. More highways has come, more expressways has come in this city in last 4 years. But why there is a problem? Why there is a problem to budget for city bus service? Again, it's a public service, right? And it has to be subsidized. We cannot look into profit out of these buses. For example, even road infrastructure in our countries aren't that, like whatever highways and all that we are making, it is not that all the money that is covering through the tolls. It's not like there is a subsidy to construct so many roads. Then why there is a hesitation in the state government and even city municipality or the city transport authorities having so much of problem to subsidize bus system where it is moving masses? It is a mass transit, like so many people using need to use, and you still using whatever ability there. And why there is a problem? So this is the problem is in the budgetary system and willingness. The main problem is actually willingness. As Ratul said that it's a lobby, and it's like again everything is like boils down that people who are using public transport or who are actually only source of their mobility is public transport and walking, they don't have voice in the system. That's the biggest problem.
They are not politicians. Yeah.
Yeah. So they are the silent users and silent victims of the city. Either it's a woman, either it is a minority or children, elderly, whatever. They are the minority, and they are the only users, I must say. And they don't have any voice. So problem lies there. And another problem is the capacity of the government departments. This system who runs this, None of this department have a transport planner, a urban planner, urban designer. It is run by civil engineers. They don't look city for people. They only, because they all are using cars, abled men, so they think cities will run like that. So that is also a problem. We need to build capacity inside the government to scale these schemes to make it more sustainable, and developing that willingness from political system to bureaucratic system. It's a huge gap right now. And I don't know, public transport has to be run in loss. It is not a profit making system. Developing street, footpath, and cycle track is not for profit. It is for people's good. It is serving people. And that is where the public money should go.
Absolutely. And in this country where parking of cars is subsidized by the state in such a large this thing, that there's so much pushback when there's free bus rides for women saying, oh, this is freebies. But what about the car owner, the amount of freebies they get? Before I go to Shreya, I will give Aishwarya a chance. If you'd like to just add some points, and then Shreya.
Yeah, and I completely align with what Rutul and Sarika said it. So there have been, initiatives at different levels of government, be it like cities, like it's an, but they're in silos. So they are like from small scale pilot projects. But we need to shift and do this transition from small scale pilot projects to a large scale action. And then for me, what I think could be a step is to launch a centrally sponsored initiative, something on the lines of like gender inclusive Indian cities challenge, or the lines of cities for people challenge, or cycle for change challenge, or transport for all, because those challenges really garnered the attention and really made cities responsible to focus on streets and cycling. I think in the similar lines, if something of such challenge could be proposed, because in my experience, whenever we go and speak to different officials at different levels, as Sarika mentioned, that because of the lack of the capacity, firstly they take time to really understand that there are different patterns, travel patterns when it comes to women and men. So I think first that level of understanding is sort of missing. But once they sort of understand also, they just empathize, but nothing really do it on ground. So budget, of course, we need that to have this transformation, coupled with capacity development efforts, as Sarika detailed it out. And also, to make really women visible, we need to collect, I think all of us agree, and I'm just reiterating that we need to collect and mainstream gender, age, and disability data so that that can be used in preparing comprehensive mobility plans that captures mobility of care, perception of safety, sexual harassment, and also, additionally, I would say safety audits. Like, of course, Safety Pin does so much of safety audits, but then if that data could also be included with the cities, and cities themselves become capable enough to conduct those, safety audits, have it in their in the process of preparing these plans, I think that would be more helpful.
Thank you. And I think in the chat, Shruti Sharma shared a study on experiences of college-going women commuters in the Delhi NCR region. I think it's a very interesting study. Thank you for sharing it. Shreya, over to you. And I think we may have to wind up after that, Kimaya. Yeah.
I just wanted to share some numbers here. We are rightly said by Rutul that it's very hard to read municipal budgets. Also, a lot of the expenditure that's being done in cities are done by states, because the state directly oversee most of the large roads in most of our Indian cities are actually directly administered by the state government. They don't belong to the city. But we did such a study for one of the large metros in India. And what we found, interestingly, and this was like looking at budgets over a 4-year period, not just a single year, looking at how much money is being spent on various kinds of pieces of infrastructure or other kinds of subsidies. And this is what we found, that buses were getting per trip, buses were getting, and this is one of the best states in the country, buses were getting 2 rupees subsidy per trip. Do you want to take a guess what subsidy cars were getting, direct or indirect? Just take a guess, wild guess.
20,000.
Well, it was 80 rupees per trip. 80 rupees per trip for a car ride.
Per trip, you say, yeah.
Per trip.
Yeah.
Per trip, 80 rupees for car and 2 rupees for a bus. Now, look at also the whole EV transition. You know, lots of talk about EV transition. For the cost of what most states have been giving as a freebie to somebody to buy a car, just as, like, you know, as a grant, has been somewhere between 1.5 to 2.5 lakh rupees to buy a car, right? So imagine how many bus passes you can get out of this for AC buses. So in a city like Bombay, you would be able to get 250 bus passes. So 250 people could have actually had a bus pass versus one car owner getting this freebie. Now the question is, what makes this person who's buying a car deserve the 2.5 lakh rupees? And what makes the 250 people not deserve free buses?
Yeah. I also want to come back to the chat. It's very nice. Someone is talking about how in Guatemala, I'm so happy that we have such a wide range of people listening to this. In Guatemala, that they're using young women to make these interactive maps and doing safety audits, and they're finding similar issues of, you know, access to opportunities and safety that is a result of this. So before we wind up, Kirti Bhai, would you be saying something now? How do we do this? Like,
No, let's just to say thank you very much, and I think, you know, please get.
Sorry, I just joined back.
Yeah.
Sorry, Kalpana, I'm sorry for disturbing Kirti ji. I'm very sorry for disturbing. I don't know
please
if
go
this...
ahead. Yeah, you wanted to say something? Yeah, before we wind up.
Sorry, I just wanted to do a quick reaction to something that Shreya just said. And, you know, I've been listening for a bit of time. I'm not sure if this point has fully been grasped. But one thing we are experiencing, you know, in our work is that there's always a demand from the urban transport authorities, you know, the public transport authority or the, you know, municipal corporation, that whenever they invest anything in women's safety, there should be some business case for it. And I completely hear you, Shreya, that, you know, if you can give so many car subsidies, then why can't you give, you know, free transport for women or free transport in general? You know, why only to women? I mean, you know, from a decarbonization point of view, of course, there's a case to be made even for that. But at the same time, we are coming under a lot of pressure. So I'm just sharing, you know, how we go about when we are like working with different authorities to try and show a business case. And with the free transport initiatives, the business case for offering better quality of service to women is definitely getting dented. So, you know, it makes our advocacy, our, you know, arguments all that much harder to do. So I'm not saying that I disagree, but I'm just telling you that the ground reality that we face, you know, on a daily basis when we are trying to convince the authorities to invest more in inclusive transport, is that what is the point when I'm not going to earn anything out of the woman commuter if she's not paying for the ticket? You know, and that's even when the state government is paying for that ticket. It's not like the state government is not paying, you know. But despite that, the authorities have this, you know, attitude. So this is again one thing that we have to now deal with, you know. So I'm just raising it from that point of view, not that I'm disagreeing or saying that there shouldn't be some sort of free transport. In fact, I am of the belief that we should then have free transport for all, you know, so that we have more and more people using public transport. But this is where, you know, we have to really make that business case. Sorry for interrupting,
No,
Kirti ji.
Mitali,
Sorry.
not at all. Thank you so much. And I think, you know, I'm not going to try and summarize this extremely rich discussion, but I think a couple of points really, and it came up in the question also, is that I think how do we change the narrative? What is the kind of campaign? What is the kind of public awareness? Because it's not just one is the policies, budget, certainly, Rutul, Sarika, you've all talked about that. But the other side of it is the fact that, it is the narrative is not changing fast enough. It's like, why are you doing this? There's so much pushback to this little bit of free transport for women. I mean, nobody is recognizing that, it's nothing compared to the amount of disadvantages that women face in our cities. So there's a lot of backlash against women. We are seeing that even in buses, that there are now studies coming out about that. So that's just one thing. But I think the question was about, are there other campaigns? So the issues of bystander intervention, because sexual harassment, as Rutul talked about, it is not a women's problem. It is not an issue that we have to deal with in our private way. And I think that is the important point we need to put out here. It is a problem of the city. It's a problem of companies. It's a problem of the transport system. It is a problem of men. It is a problem of schools, colleges, offices. It is a problem that everyone needs to deal with, because in that process of not allowing women to feel safe and free and equal, you are disenfranchising them, disenfranchising us from equality and rights. So I think the part is there's one question saying, making case for how improving mobility would increase female workforce participation. That's also an important one. I think it is there, but there is a case for improving women's mobility just for the sake of improving women's mobility as well. Because again, this whole thing, Mitali, you're saying, it's like, for what? So now this women's workforce participation, because it's become such a big thing, it is all towards that. But it has to be beyond that as well. I mean, women have an absolute right to feel safe and free, whether they want to work or not in a particular kind of place. So I think, I think we need to widen that narrative about, what is the cost? Why are you doing this? What is the benefit? Because the benefit is simply, it's not a benefit. It's an issue of rights, as Rutul said, right to the city, equality, non-discrimination, human rights. I mean, compassionate cities, the right to urban well-being. There are so many things that we're talking about. I agree, Mitali. It's very hard to make that casual inference from that. And since Shreya has her hand up, I will give her the last word. And then I will thank, before I said, I want to thank all of you for this amazingly rich and wonderful discussion. And thank you so much from the audience for so many comments and engagements with this. So before I wind up, I'm going to say thank you. And Shreya, you can have the last word.
Thanks for Kalpana. I think you nailed it at the end, where you said we need to change the narrative, and that narrative needs to be changed in a way that really connects with the youth of today, because they have the power, they have the anger, if you will, to also make changes happen. So I was just imagine a whole bunch of school children, like 50 school children, standing on both sides of a flyover and saying, this flyover instead could have been 400 buses.
Yes.
Right?
That's our campaign for next year.
That's for next year, right? So imagine, like, we could have had 400 buses instead of this one monstrosity. And similarly, think about more ideas like that. And that's what we've been trying to do with Bus for Us, both online and offline, of changing the narrative around the bus and about mobility. Thanks.
Thank you so much. And thank you to INHAF for hosting this again so patiently and so lovingly. I must really again thank Kirtibai and his whole team for the commitment to this, taking forward these issues, because really, as we need to speak to each other to come up with ideas. And as much as a book is important, I think if we can actually come up with a campaign and do some on-ground mobilizations, it would be wonderful around this as well. So thank you very much, and good evening to all of you. Friday evening, enjoy your weekends if you can.
Kalpana ji, a small little kind of last word.
Please,
First,
please.
of course, I think an incredibly rich discussion that we had today. I also want to say this, that, with the help of Urban Lab, INHAF is involved in doing an interesting study, which is looking at investment in infrastructure, mobility infrastructure in Bhopal and Ahmedabad, and also looking at what impact does it have on the need of the poor. And I thought learned a great deal today. I think from Shreya and everyone else. And I think we want to kind of share with you. I think what we're doing, and I think you may have many more ideas to share with us in terms of how to go about doing this. So that's a small little advantage, but that's a very big advantage in that sense. Thank you very much. And Kalpana ji, we look forward to the second edition of this webinar, and equally rich, I'm sure. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. And thank you, Kemya. Thank you, Bhumaji. And thank you, everyone, Saraji. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone.
Is Nusrat gone?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, I think she should know that India, Ahmedabad is all of Pakistan because of a very big cricket match tomorrow here. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Kirti ji. Bye, everyone. Thank you.